Welcome back, everybody, on a Friday night. It is March 27th, 2026, and we are in the middle of Mark 10, verse 32. And they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. And taking the 12 again, he began to tell them what was to happen to him, saying, See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him. And after 3 days he will rise. Okay, so first question. In Mark 10:33 and many other instances, why does Jesus speak of himself in the third person? In Mark 10:33 throughout the Gospels, Jesus frequently refers to himself using the title the Son of Man in the third person. This linguistic choice is more than just a stylistic quirk. It carries deep theological, cultural, and humble connotations. Here are the primary reasons: identification with the messianic prophecy. The phrase Son of Man is a direct reference to the book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible. By using the third person, Jesus was pointing his listeners to a specific scriptural figure rather than just talking about himself as an individual. The use of Eliism for objectivity. Speaking of oneself in the third person is known as Eliism. In ancient rhetorical contexts, this was often used to give a statement an air of objective truth or divine decree. By saying the Son of Man must suffer, Jesus frames his mission not as a personal preference or a private tragedy, but as a divine necessity, an objective part of God's plan that is bigger than his individual persona. Okay, well, that makes sense. Verse 35. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. And he said to them, What do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory. Jesus said to them, You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? Okay, hold on one sec. The reason I stalled a bit there. So in Matthew, when this happens, it's their mother that's asking for them. For the mother asked the mother asked Jesus for her sons to sit at his right and left hand. But in Mark, it's saying that the sons asked him directly. So I'm going to ask about that. In Mark 10:35 through 37. Oops. 37. Does this not differ from the telling in Matthew? In Matthew, where their mother asks for them and not them directly. The answer is yes. There is a distinct difference between how Mark and Matthew frame this specific request. In Mark 10:35 through 37, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, approach Jesus directly. In Matthew 20:20 through 21, it is their mother who kneels before Jesus to make the ask on their behalf. Here's a breakdown of why this discrepancy exists and how scholars generally view it. I shouldn't say I hate. I don't like when it does the table thing. Okay, the petitioner in Mark, James and John directly. In Matthew, it's the mother. They ask for the same thing. So all the stories are the same except for, well, the fact that the mother asked in Matthew versus the sons directly asking. In Mark, the disciples were present in both cases. Why the difference? There are two main ways to look at this, depending on whether you view the text through a historical or literary lens. I'm not sure what that means. The helicopter parent interpretation. Many readers harmonize the two accounts by assuming the mother was the spokesperson, but the brothers were standing right there, prompting the request. Even in Matthew's version, Jesus addresses his reply directly to the brothers. You do not know what you are asking, using the plural you in Greek, suggesting he held them responsible for the ambition, regardless of who spoke the words. The literary thematic focus. Mark's perspective. Mark is often considered the earliest gospel, which is interesting. He tends to be more gritty and direct, showing the disciples with all their flaws, including their raw ambition. Matthew's perspective. Some scholars suggest Matthew might have been trying to soften the blow to the apostles' reputation. By involving the mother, the brothers look slightly less opportunistic, though, as mentioned, Jesus doesn't let them off the hook in his response. Which even that is, so I want to ask about this. How is this generally received then, that the author of a gospel would take such liberties with the storytelling? Is there a spiritual component to it? Or just the author's preference? It's a great question that gets to the heart of how the Gospels were written. To a modern reader, these differences might feel like taking liberties, but to an ancient audience, they were often seen as purposeful editorial choices meant to highlight specific spiritual truths. Depending on who you ask, the reception of these differences usually falls into three categories. The thematic spiritual component. In the ancient world, history wasn't just about a transcript of words. It was about the meaning of the event. Okay. Matthew's goal. Matthew wrote primarily for a Jewish audience and often focused on the structure of the kingdom. By including the mother, he may be highlighting the household nature of the request, or using her as a foil to show that even those closest to Jesus didn't get it yet. The agency factor. Spiritually, the focus remains on the heart. Even if the mother spoke, the desire belonged to the brothers. In Matthew 20:22, Jesus ignores the mother's presence and looks directly at James and John to say, "Are you able to drink the cup?" The spiritual lesson that the kingdom is for the humble, not the ambitious, remains the core truth. Okay? The apostolic protection theory. As you noted, many scholars believe Matthew, writing later than Mark, was protective of the apostles' reputation. By the time Matthew was written, James and John were revered leaders and martyrs. Mark, being the raw gospel, presents the disciples as constantly failing, slow to learn, and often quite blunt. Matthew, being the teaching gospel, tends to smooth over the disciples' rougher edges. He doesn't delete their failures, but he frames them in a way that emphasizes the lesson rather than just the embarrassment. Okay. So I'm being piddly, but I just can't help myself. I'm just curious how all these things get taken. So to say this, is this to say, for lack of a better term, is this to say a little white? I mean, it's not a lie. I don't know. I'm just gonna ask it that way. I mean, no disrespect. A little white lie is okay if the ends justify the means. That is the million-dollar question of biblical scholarship, and it touches on a fascinating tension between modern journalism and ancient biography. To a modern reader, changing a detail to make someone look better feels like a white lie. However, from the perspective of the gospel writers and their contemporary audience, they didn't see it as lying versus truth, but rather as reporting versus interpretation. Here's how that smoothing over is generally understood. The ancient concept of truth. In the first century, a biographer's job wasn't just to provide a chronological police report. Their goal was to capture the substance of a person's character. Mark's truth. The disciples were ambitious and didn't understand Jesus. He shows this by having them ask the question directly. Matthew's truth. The disciples were ambitious and didn't understand Jesus, and their family was likely involved in the push for power. Okay. That's probably that's how I would best take it out of everything it's said so far. Matthew isn't deleting the sin. The disciples still get rebuked by Jesus, and the other 10 apostles still get angry at them. He is simply providing more color or context that he feels better explains the situation to his specific audience. Yeah, and knowing mothers, I don't know, to me I would think the opposite, that maybe she was goading them to ask Jesus for that position. The portrait versus the Polaroid. Think of the Gospels like two different painters painting the same sunset. Okay, that's fine. All right. Does the end justify the means? Theologically, most scholars wouldn't call it a white lie because of a concept called literary reciprocity. The ancient audience expected, important word there, expected, an author to arrange, edit, and highlight details to make a point. If Matthew softened the blow, he wasn't trying to trick people into thinking the disciples were perfect. Yeah, I didn't get that out of Matthew anyway. He still includes Peter's denial and their desertion in Gethsemane. He was simply focusing the reader's attention on Jesus' response rather than the disciples' audacity. Yeah, okay. Well, that's fine. I accept those explanations. Okay, so back to verse 38. After they ask, Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Thank you, Jesus. Verse 46, "And they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, 'Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.' And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried out all the more, 'Son of David, have mercy on me.' And Jesus stopped and said, 'Call him.' And they called the blind man, saying to him, 'Take heart, get up, he is calling you.' And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, 'What do you want me to do for you?' And the blind man said to him, 'Rabbi, let me recover my sight.' And Jesus said to him, 'Go your way, your faith has made you well.' And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way." Mark 11. Now when they drew near to Jerusalem, to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find a colt tied, on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' say, 'The Lord has need of it, and will send it back here immediately.'" And they went away and found a colt tied at a door outside in the street, and they untied it. And some of those standing there said to them, "What are you doing, untying the colt?" And they told them what Jesus had said, and they let him go. And they let them go. And they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. And many spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut from the fields. And those who went before and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest." And he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry, and seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. So, okay. In Mark 11, 12 through 14, why did Jesus curse the fig tree? Wouldn't he have known already that it bore no fruit? I always wondered that, like, if he, because Jesus was God in a man's body, but if there was like an off and on kind of thing, or if he was just always had his divine power, like what if his omniscience was always on, or if he had to tap into it, kind of a thing, you know? This passage is one of the more startling moments in the Gospels because it shows a side of Jesus that seems uncharacteristically frustrated. However, most scholars and theologians agree that the cursing of the fig tree wasn't an emotional outburst, but a prophetic acted parable. To understand why he did it and why his prior knowledge matters, it helps to look at the timing and the botanical context. The acted parable. In the Old Testament, prophets often performed symbolic actions to deliver a message, like Hosea marrying Gomer or Ezekiel lying on his side. By cursing the tree, Jesus was visually demonstrating the coming judgment on Jerusalem and the religious establishment. The symbolism. In Hebrew scripture, the fig tree often symbolizes the nation of Israel. The message: the tree had leaves, a sign of vitality, but no fruit. Similarly, the temple in Jerusalem had the leaves of religious ritual, but lacked the fruit of true righteousness and faith. The botanical deception. The text notes that it was not the season for figs, which makes Jesus' expectations seem unfair at first glance. However, there is a specific biological quirk to Palestinian fig trees. The tash. Before the actual harvestable figs appear in June, the tree produces small edible buds called tash. The signal: if a tree has full leaves in early spring, it should have these edible buds. The failure: if a tree had leaves but no buds, it was a sign that the tree was diseased or barren and would produce no fruit that year. The tree was effectively advertising fruit it didn't have. And did he know already? You're right to point out that from a divine perspective, Jesus would have known the tree was empty. This reinforces the idea that he didn't walk up to the tree to get a snack and lose his temper. He walked up to the tree to use it as a stage. Okay. What are we at? Verse 15. And they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And so we learned last time when reading through this in Matthew that the temples, the Jewish temples would not accept the Roman currency, so they had these. There was only a certain currency, I forget which one it was, but it was only a certain currency that people would have to bring in their Roman coin for and exchange it for this acceptable money, and they could give that to the temple. And then the pigeons were there because they had to offer sacrifices, but the poor folk couldn't afford to, sacrifice lambs and goats, things of that nature. So the temple would sell pre-approved, because they had to be, up to snuff, pre-approved pigeons that the lower income people could come in and purchase to sacrifice at the temple. But of course, the Jewish people, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, were making a profit off of this, turning it into a lucrative business when really it should, it was supposed to be a sacred thing. Okay, anyway, verse 16. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it a den of robbers? And the chief priest and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him. Oh, pardon me. For they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when evening came, they went out of the city. As they passed by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. And Peter remembered and said to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered. And Jesus answered them, have faith in God. Truly, I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive, if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father, also who is in heaven, may forgive you your trespasses. I mean, how do you not? Oh my gosh. What did I just do? Yeah. How do you not love that? I mean, just read that every morning and remember that. Let's read it one more time. And Jesus answered them, have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father, also who is in heaven, may forgive you your trespasses. Verse 27. And they came again to Jerusalem. And as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him. And they said to him, by what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do them? Jesus said to them, I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? Answer me. And they discussed it with one another, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, why then did you not believe him? But shall we say from man? They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John really was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, we do not know. And Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Got him. All right, Mark 12. And he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a fence around it and dug a pit for the winepress and built a tower and leased it to tenants and went into another country. When the season came, he sent a servant to the tenants to get from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. And they took him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Again he sent to them another servant, and they struck him on the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and him they killed. And so with many others, some they beat, and some they killed. He had still one other, a beloved son. Finally he sent him to them, saying, they will respect my son. But those tenants said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. And they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the tenants and give the vineyard to others. Have you not read this scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to arrest him, but feared the people, for they perceived that he had told the parable against them. So they left him and went away. And they sent to him some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap him in his talk. And they came and said to him, Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God. Buttering him up. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, Why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. And they brought one. The denarius was the Roman currency. And they brought one, and he said to them, Whose likeness and inscription is this? They said to him, Caesar's. Jesus said to them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. I always highlight that one when I come across it. It's just, it's badass. They just weren't smart enough. And Sadducees came to him. Verse 18. And Sadducees came to him, who say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife, but leaves no child, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Wait, what? Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife, okay, a man's brother dies, leaves a wife, but leaves no child, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. So if my brother had a wife and he died, I would be my duty to take her and have children with her, is what they're saying. There were 7 brothers. The first took a wife, and when he died, left no offspring. And the second took her and died, leaving no offspring. And the third likewise. So this wife was passed around through all the brothers because none of them ever had children with her. And the 7 left no offspring. Last of all, the woman also died. In the resurrection, when they rise again, whose wife will she be? For the 7 had her as wife. Jesus said to them, Is this not the reason you are wrong? Because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the passage about the bush, how God spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? He is not God of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong. Dang. So essentially saying here, which is always interesting to think about if you're saved, once we're finally all in heaven, it's not, as far as I know, it's not clear whether or not we'll retain our memories from earth. But what is pretty clear here, this is basically what God is saying, or what Jesus is saying, is that our relationships from our earthly relationships aren't going to matter anymore. So he's saying that you're thinking about it the wrong way, Your marriage won't mean anything in heaven. We're all going to be in different new bodies. So I guess it would stand to reason that maybe we won't have our memories, but who knows? But it's a fascinating thing to think about. Okay, what are we at? Oh, we're at 32 minutes. Okay. So we are going to halt here at verse 28, Mark 12:28. We'll pick up here tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to sub. God bless and good night.